Hello everybody, and welcome to a brand new mini-series. And I know, how many mini-series do you want on one channel, good fella? Well, at least one more, and it's going to be about balance. So, why balance? Well, because Edain is imbalanced. Edain? Imbalanced? Never! Well, actually, yes, it is. But then again, so is every other game. Company of Heroes? Imbalanced. StarCraft? Imbalanced. I mean, even chess is imbalanced, because don't forget, white gets to move first. But of course, games like StarCraft and games like chess are extremely close to being perfectly balanced. Edain, on the other hand, has an extremely long way to go. But I believe that we, as a community, can bring balance to the Force. To Edain. And how are we going to do this? We're going to do it through discussion and, indeed, arguments. So feel free to have your heated debates down in my comment section. But don't forget that the official realm for balanced discussions in Edain is on the Modding Union forums. Link in the description. And also don't forget that it will be an argument. Like, people are gonna disagree. You're gonna disagree with a lot that I say, and I am probably gonna disagree with a lot that you say. But we should have these arguments, we should have these discussions, so that we can come to a consensus, and we can make Edain a truly great multiplayer experience. So, in this series, I'm going to be covering specific units, specific matchups that I believe need balancing, and I'm starting with Imladris vs Isengard. I hope you enjoy. What is the problem that I see in Imladris vs Isengard? Well, in my opinion, Isengard is so much stronger than Imladris in the early game that the matchup is almost broken, and this is a perfect example of why, in my opinion, that is the case. So this is me playing Imladris, and my opponent is WCP, and as we see here, he's gone for a Warg Pit start. Now already, this is terrible news for me, because Isengard can hit Imladris super early with cavalry, and that is one of the biggest disadvantages for Imladris. Being hit with very fast units, especially cavalry. Now you see here I've set my starter unit over to grab this farm, but once I realised that he is Isengard and also that he's going for a Warg start, thanks to Gildor, I realised that I can't afford to get this outside farm, I need to get pikes instead. And if I send my starter unit over here, they're going to be extremely vulnerable. So instead I need to pull them back, buy a pike. I'm going to go ahead and use Aerostar to get the pike out quickly so that they can be quickly defended from a Warg rush. And go ahead and creep over here instead. Then the money from the creeping I'll use to grab this farm, and I'll use Gildor to grab it. Now that may seem insignificant, but actually that can decide the game. If you don't realise how strong a cavalry rush is against Imladris, and you go ahead and use a strategy that I often like to use, which is sending your starter unit over here to grab this farm, then creep the wargs, it will be almost 100% exclusively GG. As soon as your enemy gets cavalry out, realizes that you're up here, they can simply trample your starter unit, and that's 500 resources lost. That is the issue with Imladris. Losing units is such a huge deal, whereas it's not such a huge deal with other factions. The counterpart to that is that keeping units with Imladris is so much more important than it is with other factions. So really that isn't really where the problem of the balance lies, in my opinion. It lies elsewhere. So, let's just have a think about it here. I am pretty far behind already. So, I've spent all this money on this pike. It's cost me 900 resources to get it, because I've had to build the barracks first, and then build the pike. And because I've had to spend all those resources, remember it's a 1k start, I haven't been able to invest nearly enough in my economy. So here I have 2 buildings out. Isengard has got 4 eco buildings, and he's had those 4 eco buildings for a little bit longer than I have, so already his economy is quite significantly far ahead. And he's also getting some Warg Riders out, so he's got these 2 very strong starter units in the scouts, and they're especially strong when they get their bow and arrow, which we'll see. Particularly in this matchup, they are crazy strong. And he's managing to creep the creep the troll, whilst he's also creeped the wildman. I've only finished creeping my second wildman, and here are the wargs coming out. Now, it's quite nice to gain these two outside farms with Gildor because he gets this elven cloak, so that will protect him from the early wargs. But the wargs can do other stuff. They don't necessarily have to start killing your units or your heroes. They can obviously start harassing your outside farms. So let's have a look here. And we'll just hover over to my Palantir now. So I've only got 400 resources. Now, I could have got another pike unit, but I decided to go for this eco because I realised that I'm going to need an extremely strong eco if I stand a chance in this match. Now, I'll draw your attention over here. Because WCP has bought his warg and he sent him over here and he's creeped these wildmen, he's been able to spend that money to get a clan steading, and he's going to be producing some wildmen of his own. Now, this is extremely devastating for any faction if you don't have cavalry, and it's particularly devastating for Imladris because everything is so expensive for Imladris, and therefore it's very difficult to afford to get cavalry out at the same time. Now here you see a mistake on my part where I'm allowing these pikes to get hit by these wildmen, and they're actually losing quite a lot of health. So this is just a plain mistake from me. Really, I should have pulled them behind the swordsman, and here I do, but it's a little bit too late, because now I've only got 3 battalions, so I've only got 3/5 of the potential damage output. Nevertheless, they're still pikes, and they're still the direct counter to cavalry, but these wargs give almost no f***s. They just go ahead and charge through the pikes, and as we see here, they do it again. And really, I think this is one of the big problems, is the effectiveness of pikes against cavalry in general in the game isn't that great. And as we see, because of that, he's managed to charge over my sword unit as well, and they've been completely unprotected because of these pikes. And there we go, the pike, it's the perfect example that the pike there died from a trample from the wargs, and it didn't actually die from the wildman, although of course the wildman inflicted a lot of damage beforehand. So let's have a look now. The position is almost lost entirely for me now so early on, because he's got a few wildmen out, which, how am I going to counter them now? Because I need units. I just have to have units to counter his warg riders, to counter his scouts, to gain some kind of map to help me creep. I can't just buy 1 battalion of cavalry, because warg riders are anti-cavalry, so they'll simply use Howl, and they'll chase that cavalry unit down, and it will die very, very quickly. So I'm almost completely lost now, because I have to keep spending money on my infantry units. I can't afford cavalry to counter this wildman, as well as countering the scouts, don't forget, are extremely good unless you have cavalry. So over here, I'm just trying to creep a little bit and gain some kind of control over the map. And I'm getting some more pikes and getting some more swordsmen. But really, this is GG almost. Let's have a look at the map, just in case you're not convinced about how desperate my position is. He's got the entirety of the map on this side. I've got a couple farms over here, but there's no reason why he's not going to be able to destroy them with these wildmen and the wargs. And let's have a look at the inside economy. His inside economy is vastly superior to mine. I've got no inside economy. He's got, what is this, 5 buildings? So it's just terrible, terrible news for me. And I may as well almost give up at this point. Now, I'm just going to speed it up a little bit, and I don't usually do this, but because I am focusing so much on some specific points, I will be speeding up a lot of the matches, just so that a lot of the irrelevant points I kind of gloss over. So, here we are, here's the wildman, and they've really got free roaming all over the map, as well as these Isengard scouts. Here I'm still creeping. So, really, it's only a matter of time now for Isengard to just come in and really end it, kill all of my units, and make it GG. The Isengard scouts in this matchup are so extremely strong once they get to level 2, because they can target Imladris pikes, and they do a huge amount of damage, as we see here, WCP perfectly targeting the pikes. And look at the damage that they're doing, just a few volleys and they're almost entirely dead, and in no time soon they will be dead. In the meanwhile, the wargs trample over my swordsman, and there goes that unit of pikes. Now, it's only a matter of time for WCP to destroy that unit of pikes, and the wargs will simply trample the rest. I realised that at that point, and I gave the GG. So there was the perfect example of Isengard having quite an easy win over Imladris. Now, you may think that was through my own mistake, but I will be showing you a few more matches where I play Imladris a little bit better and still lose. Here's an example of what you could consider some better Imladris play from myself. And actually, I changed a little bit about how I go about creeping. So, I'm still going to go for Gildor, but I'm actually going to wait a little while, and I'm going to go ahead and get a pike right off the bat instead. Simply just to get the pike out a little bit earlier, so it can help me to creep the troll actually, which I'm going to try and steal from my enemy, as well as helping to protect my swords a lot quicker, because once again, here, I'm playing against Elendil, and he has realised as well how strong Warg starts can be against Imladris, so he's done the exact same thing. So here you see a little bit of creeping. Now this isn't very easy to do, to creep a troll with one starter battalion like this with Imladris, so already that's a little bit of a disadvantage if you're not so good in macromanagement. However, the potential to do it is there, so it still should be considered when we're thinking about balance. So here we go, I've got my pike coming out, I've also got Gildor coming out because I've got just about enough money for him now. And I'm going to go ahead and just grab this troll straight away. Now, once I have this pike out, I'm going to use it to creep this troll over here, and the plan is to get one battalion of cavalry out, because we know how important cavalry is. Number one in countering the wildmen, but even if your enemy doesn't go for wildmen, it's so important to counter the scouts, because as we saw in the last game, the scouts, probably above anything else, are the ones that are so good against Imladris, especially when you combine that with wargs. We also saw that in the 3v3 that I played, if you've watched it, my Outpost Simulator video, where I used wargs and scouts in unison, as well with Sharku, to defeat my enemy Iranian in that team game. So here we see, actually, I have got the opportunity to steal the troll. Now Elendil here rode past with his wargs, so he's seen that I'm here, and he's come over with his scouts, who are on archer mode, because they're at level 2, and there's a hunting arrow, and now look at the damage that they do, along with a hunting arrow. It's actually quite huge, so I haven't lost any yet, but very soon, as we see, 2 are down in the battalion. Or is it even... No, yes, it is 2 down in that battalion. And now it's 3 down in the battalion. So now 2/3 of the damage output of this pike is gone. And we know how pretty well, actually, wargs do against pikes. From the last game I showed, that really, these wargs are probably going to have no trouble just straight ahead, just going ahead and trampling through those pikes. As long as the scouts are here to back them up, as we see Elendil is doing perfectly here. Now I decide to stop. I activate this ability, Standfast, which reduces the speed of the wargs. But look at this. This is giving the scouts perfect opportunity to attack the pikes. And they're doing quite a lot of damage to them. Now, luckily for me, the pikes kill enough wargs to get to level 2. So they will actually start to regenerate. And they're not in too much trouble now. However, because he's got 2 battalions of scouts over here, my pikes are still in quite a bit of trouble, and we can see how much damage they do. So really now I'm just having to run away. In the meantime, I'm getting these cavalry out. Gildor here, a little bit of a mistake from me to send Gildor in, because he's just going to die to the wargs. The cavalry here is my next main objective, because I really want to counter these scout units, because they are what is causing me the biggest problem at the moment. If I had killed those scout units, these wargs won't be a huge problem, because as soon as they charge them into pikes, I'll be able to survive. The issue is the wargs charging into the pikes, knocking the pikes down, and then the scout archers getting in so many hits and actually killing the pikes. Once my pikes are dead, these swordsmen are so much more vulnerable, they'll die, and with it I'll lose the game. So let's hover over to my Palantir just now as we follow this fight and keep notice of how much health these pikes have got. So here it is. I've just spent a lot of resources. There's that hunting arrow, which reduces the armor of my pikes, and it does a lot of damage in itself. And there goes my pike unit. So now these soldiers are in real big trouble. However, this warg battalion has suffered a lot of damage. But look at the damage of the scout archers here. Look at that. I mean, it killed that unit in seconds, but luckily it regenerated just in time. But it's not going to be enough, because this lone single warg is just going to destroy this unit along with the archer battalion there. So that is really the perfect example of the scouts and the wargs working in perfect unison. Now, here... Luckily, I've got my cavalry unit out in time, but here is another example of why wargs are so good. They are anti-cavalry cavalry, so they're actually faster than my cavalry. So here I'm trying to trample them, and look at the damage of the trample. Yes, it killed quite a lot, but it didn't completely kill all of them from that trample. And these scout units are still doing a little bit of damage. Now look here, there's flanking damage being done by these wargs, and I can't actually escape from them because they're faster than my cavalry. So this is the issue with wargs as well in this matchup, is that they can chase down the cavalry. There goes my cavalry, there goes all my units. Look at this, 0 command points, and that's it. It's another GG. It's another example of Isengard just simply very easily beating Imladris. Now once again, I could have played it better, but it's just an example of how easy it can be for Isengard to destroy Imladris within the first few minutes of the game. So you've seen me play and lose as Imladris, but here's an opportunity for you to see me play and win as Isengard versus Imladris. So me and Elendil have switched up factions, and really this is another example of how Isengard can just do so well against Imladris in the early game. So this is after quite a few games actually that me and Elendil had played, and we'd both kind of come up with a few strategies that we thought might work potentially for Imladris versus Isengard. So what Elendil is doing here is he's going for a barrack start, and he's going to go ahead and get pikes out straight away. Now he's decided not to capture these two outside farms, and you'll see how I can exploit that a little bit later in this game. So we'll speed it up a little bit. He's getting his pike out. Obviously I'm here with my wargs because I'm going to go for a Warg Rush because I know it works so well against Imladris. I've also gone for the Vision of the Palantir. Now this is an extremely important power for Isengard. I use it in every single Isengard I ever play as my first power, because not only do you see what faction your enemy is if you've gone random, but you can also see the exact strategy that he's using, and it's especially good versus Imladris to work out whether your enemy is going to go for some early pikes, whether they're going to go for very early cavalry, or basically what their entire idea is in the matchup. So here we see I've got my wargs out. Now because I said we've played a few matches, I actually knew the kind of strategy that Elendil was going for. All that being said, I very nearly charge into some pikes, and he does do a little bit of damage. Not even very nearly, I do in fact charge into some pikes. I use the howl to kind of escape. So that's a bit of bad micromanagement there from me already. So if I had bad micromanagement like that with if I was playing Imladris, like I did against WCP, you saw there that it was almost GG. But in this case, I had a bit of bad micromanagement, but it's really not affected my play all that much. Here you see, this is what I was talking about. I knew that he wasn't going to go for these farms, so I'm just going to go ahead and grab them with my wargs, because why not? I may as well just grab these farms and gain a bit of extra resources that he's not going to be able to grab. So here is my scout units, and they're on the archer mode. So my whole focus now is to target these pikes, because you know, it's kind of just rinse and repeat now. You know the strategy that is very good for Isengard against Imladris, and I'm basically going to do it. Look at the damage that is being dealt to these pikes. There goes 3 in that battalion, and he's only got 2 left. Now, he's gone for 2 pikes rather than going for some early cavalry or some other styles of play, and he's also gone for these 2 forges, so his inside economy isn't going to be too bad. And really, this is what I'd recommend if you are going to play Imladris in this current patch, is to go for 2 pikes, because 1 pike very often isn't enough, but 2 pikes allows you to survive that a little bit longer, for you to maybe even get your 3rd pike out. But I really don't like that idea that you have to buy so many pikes just to counter the cavalry. Really, I believe that 1 pike should be enough to counter 1 or 2 battalions of cavalry. Whereas currently you almost sometimes have to outnumber the number of pikes to the number of cavalries, especially if you combine it with something like these scouts here. So this is exactly what I'm doing. There goes another unit in that battalion. So there's 1 battalion of pikes now, and here he is, this one guy in this battalion who's on half health. So if I can get a shot in with to him from these scouts, he's going to lose that entire battalion, and that's going to be a big setback for him. In the meantime, I'm using the 2nd battalion of wargs to go ahead and creep and gain more of the map. So all this time while he's, you know, the poor guy is simply trying to creep and trying to gain some of the map, but I'm constantly harassing him and constantly making him so worried about losing this clump. And once again, if you lose a clump like this as Imladris, it's GG. Like, there's so much money invested in this clump that it's so difficult to lose it, especially when you've got like none of the map to build, so you've got none of the economy to build your armies back. So here are my scouts, and here's a good little bit of micromanagement of the scouts versus these Imladris troops. Now here you see he's got this sword unit that's attacking my scouts, so I'm going to have to pull them back a little bit. But if he separates them too much, I can come in with my wargs, and here are my wargs to trample these units. There you see I targeted that one unit that was left in that battalion, so there goes that battalion. So that's 600 resources lost. Now I can really start to target this last battalion of pikes, and once that is down, my wargs can trample everything else, and really, once again, it's going to be GG. So I'm going to speed it up a little bit every now and then, just so it doesn't become too much of a drag for you guys to watch, and so that I'm only really focusing on the important bits. So once again, there is a bit of bad micromanagement, but it's really not affecting me too much. Like, I'm still winning by far. Let's have a look at the map. Okay, he's got over here because I brought my wargs over to try and deal some damage over to this. Look at this. Look at the damage being dealt there to those pikes. They're almost completely dead from just a few volleys from those scouts there. Here, some wargs came over to try and grab that money. But here's an example of one-on-one with the swords. Actually, the wargs can do pretty badly. However, I managed to grab that bit of money. So once again, some bad micromanagement from me, but it doesn't really matter because I'm still winning, and I'm still winning by quite some margin. So I've got a lot more of the map than he does, although he's got quite a bit of the inside economy. But as soon as these guys die, really he's going to be in such huge trouble. Here, these wargs, now that I've got a fresh battalion out to target this battalion of swords, they're in quite a bit of trouble. And he's going to have to bring it over to this pike and protect them in that way. Now, he's going to be getting a pike, as I guessed that he would, and indeed he is at this point. He desperately needs more pikes, because as soon as this one dies, and it is on quite low health, he's going to be in a huge amount of trouble. He may also be thinking about investing in a well. But it's all just money. It's money, money, money that Imladris really doesn't have. There goes that battalion of pikes. The hunting arrows just demolished that weakened unit of pikes. They may have got a couple of volleys in as well, but it's so quick to destroy the pikes if you micro your scout units well. So now once again he's only got one battalion of pikes, and it's another example. This is like the game that I played against him, where he's having to retreat around his fortress, which is like, you never really want to do this, because what are your units doing? They're not doing anything, these guys. The only thing that these guys are doing at the moment is just trying desperately to survive, because if they die, then that's it. It's GG. So whilst I can do all this other stuff, I can creep, I can harass his farms, I can continue to chase him and try and get some kills in. Really the only thing that he can do is try and run away and try and survive. So here really you see the effectiveness of the scouts. So let's skip here to when the actual big battle happens and really the game is decided. So I've got 4 battalions of warg riders out here, which is quite a few, and it's going to be very effective for me in this game, as we'll see. Look at these pikes just dropping like flies to these archers. Now look at this. I'm just going to charge in with my wargs. There's a battalion of pikes in here, don't remember. And yes, I've got 4 battalions of wargs, but still, a battalion of Imladris pikes. And the wargs just give 0 and even with the Breeze of Manwë, the pikes are down, thanks to some concentrated fire from the Isengard scouts. And it's really archers and cavalry working in perfect unison, as I've said before in some previous videos, that it just destroys his entire army, and I continue to focus the pikes. All those kills that I've got has allowed me to get enough money for Grishnak and his boys, and in I come with the wargs, now that all the pikes are dead, and that's it. What can you do? What can you do against that, other than potentially going for some cavalry? And really it seems like infantry just isn't working in this matchup, and either you have to go for a kind of strategy that I did, where I went for just a couple battalions of infantry, in fact just 1 pike I built, then rushed for cavalry. I mean, that didn't work out for me. Or you have to maybe get 2 battalions of pikes, then go for cavalry, or you have to simply rush cavalry and forget infantry altogether. But as we'll see, a lot of it doesn't work. So here we go. The game went on for a slight little bit longer, but Elendil realised that it was all over, and there we go, there's the GG. I mentioned a little bit earlier that potentially cavalry start might do pretty well for Imladris, and here is an example of the player Dud, who actually personally believes that there isn't a problem with Imladris versus Isengard in the early game, who decides to go for pretty much a cavalry rush. Now he does go for 2 inside economy buildings, but he doesn't actually go for a barracks in this game, and instead he decides to go for a stables and build some pikes, build some cavalry. And of course I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm going for wargs right off the bat, and really I am absolutely rushing wargs. I'm not going for any inside economy buildings. I'm just building a warg pit and building a warg, which is almost always what I do with Isengard against any faction, because it works so well. But as we've seen, it works so well in particular against Imladris. So here Dud is deciding to creep the Wildman rather than going for the Troll. And it's a reasonable decision to do that. Really, I can't see any reason why you should go for the troll over the wildman, other than that little bit of extra money. But as we've seen, either way, a lot of the time it doesn't work. Now, the other thing that Dud goes for, which is quite interesting, is the Linden Watchtower. Now, as we know, towers are extremely good in this patch, and therefore, as we see here, my wargs come in, and I know that he does this because we played a few games against each other. My wargs come in to attack his units, and as we see, Imladris swordsmen are actually pretty good against wargs, as long as the wargs aren't trampling. So here I'm really trying to trample him quite a bit, but he's used this heal. Now the Linden Watchtower is up, and look at the damage that it does to the wargs. It's quite huge, because wargs don't have that much health or armor, so they do suffer quite a lot of damage to towers. So that's a nice little example where he actually uses that tower to keep his starter battalion alive. So I really do like that little strategy that Dud has come up with there. But that's not to say I can't do anything with my wargs in the meantime, because here we see I try and go over to attack Gildor. Now I think he will be able to use his Elven Cloak in time to avoid me killing him with the wargs, and in fact he just kind of runs away, and there goes the Elven Cloak, and instead I go ahead and creep here. So my wargs aren't completely useless, even though they didn't manage to kill this starter battalion. They didn't manage to kill Gildor. They are still going to be able to creep over here, and therefore gain a little bit of an advantage for me in this way. Here we see I've managed to get both of my scout units to level 2, so they've unlocked the archer ability already. So here's Dud's on 447, but he's able to creep with these starter units because they're protected by the Linden Tower. Now, if I ever come in with a battalion of wargs like this one to try and kill his starter unit, he can always bring them back to the tower, and I really can't fight around that tower as Isengard with those wargs, because I know they're going to suffer a lot of damage. And actually these guys have suffered so much damage that I'm actually worried that they're not going to be able to creep these wildmen, so I'm having to send in a second battalion, which I would have preferred to send over here to creep that wildman pit and get even more economy. So let's have a look. His resources have just gone way down, and he's actually gone for a cavalry. So here it is actually a cavalry start, because he hasn't built a barracks yet. And he's also doing this. He's increasing his production double time with these upgrades, and he's using Aerostar on that. I do believe that is actually like mathematically the correct decision. I believe it's a little bit hard to work out because it's 450 resources for double production, but then you get plus 50% from Aerostar. So I do believe it's the correct decision to go for with Imladris, but very often I don't do it because I'd rather just get another farm. Anyway, that's by the by. So here, I've managed to creep the troll and get the money from that. There's this troll over here as well that he's really not going to be able to creep, because if he brings his starter units over here, away from the Linden Tower, then they're going to be really, really vulnerable to my wargs. My wargs will be able to trample them, and really it's going to be GG for him. So I could decide to kill the troll, but actually I know from the games that we played that he likes to do this. He likes to creep over here, then creep these wargs. So I'm bringing my units over here to creep around here and getting ready to attack him and potentially destroy this farm and avoid the Linden Tower and destroy this farm. So let's have a look here. He's actually getting ready to get his first Rivendell Lancer out. And I would be using Aerostar on this building. I'm not sure if he does, but really it's quite irrelevant. So here we go. This is it. This is exactly what I was talking about. I knew that he likes to go there and creep those wargs. And there does go his starter unit. Because it's far from the Linden Tower, it's vulnerable once again. So really, if you're going to do that, you have to keep them around the Linden Tower. And really that makes, yes, the Linden Tower is pretty good at defense, but it really cripples your starter unit by not getting pikes out. So he's got this one battalion of cavalry now, but I've got like, what is this, 2-3 battalions of wargs. Yes, one is very heavily damaged, but I can always get another one out, and indeed I am getting another one out. So it's going to be like, what, 3.5 versus 1? So whenever this cavalry unit actually gets you know, outside the range of the Linden Tower, it's going to be extremely vulnerable to attack, and it's in particular going to be extremely vulnerable to the Howl ability, which turns the wargs into anti-cavalry cavalry. And if he's not careful, I'm going to be able to just completely chase him down and destroy his units. As we see here, the Linden Tower gets in a bit of damage. But once again, the scouts are doing huge amounts of damage even to the cavalry. Even though they're archers, they're doing a huge amount of damage to the cavalry. And almost 3 of the 5 units is killed there. You see this guy at the end just about survives. Now, what you really want to do is get a well as well. On the wall, so that you can ensure that your cavalry survives. Now, if you are going to go for a cavalry strategy, you really need to outnumber the wargs, and if you're facing a cavalry strategy, you really need to outnumber the cavalry with wargs. That's what the game comes down to, really. It just becomes a cavalry battle. Here we see it once again a bit a bit of bad micromanagement from me, losing my scouts. So that's actually quite a huge deal. And it would in particular be a huge deal if he had some infantry out as well. But because he's only got cavalry, really it's not actually the end of the world for me, because as we see here, in come the wargs, and they've got the howl ability back. And let's have a look here. Let's have a look at the health of these this cavalry here, this Imladris cavalry, and they're not going to be able to escape. Yes, they can pull back to the Linden Tower, but I don't mind losing a few units in my battalions, or even losing an entire battalion if I can destroy one of his Rivendell cavalry, because they're one, more expensive, and two, I've got more of the map, so I can afford to build mine back, whereas he really can't afford to build them back so much. So it's like fighting is beneficial for me. All that being said, I was suffering quite a lot of damage from that Linden Tower, and I did have to retreat in the end. So let's speed the match up a little bit. And as we see here, he's got 3 battalions of cavalry out, and he's going to get ready for the 4th battalion. But all the time, I'm getting ready to pump out more Warg Riders. And as soon as he has like 1 battalion that's left by itself, and as soon as I get my Howl back, then really they're going to be in a huge amount of trouble. Let's have a look at the map. 1, 2 farms here, 1, 2 farms here. Now I have gone for the lumber mill, so that's decreased the cost of my buildings. And that is a huge advantage for me, because I've been able to invest so much in my inside economy. Now it does got quite a lot of inside economy as well. So you may be thinking it's reasonably even, and actually it is reasonably even, and it is doing pretty well. Now I have played before against a cavalry start, and it's gone even a lot better than it has here. Although, as we'll see, very soon it starts to spiral into my favour, as I've got enough money to get this Uruk pit and upgrade it and get some pikes out. So really now, as soon as he starts to trample into the pikes, it's going to be, you know, almost GG for him right there. Because as soon as he starts to become outnumbered with his cavalry versus my wargs, then my wargs are going to become even more effective, because he's not going to be able to run away. If he outnumbers me, he can run, and I'll chase him with the howl. But if he outnumbers me, he can just stay and fight. But if I outnumber him, he really can't stay and fight, because he's going to lose either way. So here are my pikes, and they're gaining some map control for me. So let's speed it up a little bit and see how well I can do with this. Now the other thing is, because he's only going for cavalry, I can actually build a siege works here, and that is exactly what I'm doing. Now, although it is a big cavalry battle, now that I've got some pikes out, really, how is he going to be able to stop me from getting some pikes, some rams, and covering my rams with some pikes? I'm just sending them into his base, because he's got no infantry to destroy them with, and obviously his cavalry is not going to be able to defend against the pikes and the rams working in unison. So we're going to speed it really, really far up here, and we're just going to wait until I bring my rams over, because really there is no counter to this now when you're going for a full cavalry start. What I would recommend is, after you've got some cavalry out, like maybe 3 or 4 battalions of cavalry out, you really decide to go for some infantry, so that you can kind of get the best of both worlds. However, I still believe that because the wargs are such good anti-infantry, and because you can get some pikes out at Isengard, really it's still, you're in huge trouble if you're playing Imladris. However, it is quite a nice idea that Dud has used here to go for this cavalry start. But once again, it's not really working out. Now I'm going to target the wall that's got the well on it, so that he can't heal up. He's charging into the pikes desperately to try and kill these rams, but it's all over now, because what do you do against pikes and rams in your base when you've only got cavalry? So there you go, another GG, another win for Isengard against Imladris. This is the last game that I'll show as an example of Isengard's strength versus Imladris in a 1v1. And my opponent, I'm Isengard here. My opponent is Mogat. And a lot of the games that you've seen, Mogat was actually observing. So, especially versus me versus Elendil, me, Elendil, and Mogat actually decided to test out this particular matchup to see what Imladris could do against Isengard's early game. And so this was almost like a bit of a conclusion for us all, where a lot of the time I was playing against Elendil, then Mogat tried as Imladris, and we'll see how well he does in a little while. I don't want to ruin the outcome for you, but I was pretty confident in this game that I was going to beat Imladris as Isengard. So once again, it's classic Isengard versus Imladris. I'm going for a walk as soon as I possibly can. Here we see Mogat is creeping the Wildman over here, and he's going to go ahead and grab this farm. He's actually using Gildor next to his starter unit, which a few other players haven't done, and he's going to go ahead and creep these wargs in that way. And he's making sure this warg is on red health, and going to attack this warg and make sure he's on red health. And it seems as if Mogat has been watching my how to creep videos, because this is what I was doing with the Drake. No, that's not why he's done it. Just every good player knows how to do that. Anyway, moving swiftly on. I'm creeping over here, and I'm getting my scout units to level 2. And as we've seen, it's so important that the scout units are on level 2, because they unlock their bow, and once again, you can target the pikes with it. So he's used a similar strategy to Elendil in this game, and he's decided not to go for these outside farms. So me with my Warg Riders, I'm just thinking, well, you can go ahead and do that. I'm just going to go ahead and capture them, and have a much stronger economy than you do. So here we see Mogat has got his pikes out, he's got his starter unit still alive, and he's got Gildor kind of gaining some support for them. He's actually gone for a second swordsman, which is quite risky, and unfortunately for me, I do believe I play a little bit too passively here in this match, and I don't try and just go ahead and start attacking these pikes, because what I actually thought was that he was going to go for 2 pikes rather than 2 swordsmen, as I do believe that is probably the better option. But because I thought he'd done that, I thought there's not really much point in me sending my scout units over just yet, and instead I'll try and seal his troll, as we see me doing here. But that's actually probably a mistake. It is probably a little bit too passive, and I may have done even better in this matchup if I had attacked his units here now, attacked his pikes, and trampled the rest with my wargs. If I had killed these 2 units, once again it would have been GG. I also would have been able to get Gildor. But with all that being said, like, my economy is pretty strong at the moment. As we see here, Mogat has got no inside economy buildings. He's got 3 outside ones. But I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 outside economy buildings. So it's like I've got double his economy already. I've got no inside economy buildings. But because I've got 4 lumber mills, I'm actually going to have a decreased cost of the furnace to 280 resources, which is very nice, because once again, it's a bit more bang for your buck, because it's cheaper with the same amount of resource productions. So here we are. Here we see, I do believe he goes for a pike here. So he's kind of using 2 groups of units, the pikes and the swords. So here we see he's gone for a Linden Tower as well, which is very nice. And this, once again, is an example of me. I should have been more aggressive looking back on it in this game, because this actually provides quite a problem for me, as we'll see a little bit later on. If I had come in and started attacking his pikes, he would have had a lot more trouble getting this Linden Tower up. But now that it is up, these 2 units are extremely protected because of this Linden Tower. And as we'll see, he actually gets some Linden Guardians out pretty quickly. So instead of going for some cavalry, he's instead using Linden Guardians and protecting them with pikes and this sword unit here. He's also got the opportunity to start harassing my farm, as we see there. Now, in the meanwhile, I've been creeping this troll layer here, and I'm actually using my wargs to attack the troll layer, so that I'm freeing up my scouts to come over and start attacking these pikes. And I'm thinking here that I'm actually in quite a good position, because just like any other game, I can start to target these pikes, and once they're dead, and it's almost inevitable that they will die, or at least that's what I thought, that I'll be able to trample everything else, and it's just going to be GG. But as we see here, the Linden Archer is pretty much out now. And indeed, here it is. And we can see how effective Linden Archers are against anything, and even against these scouts. Look at the damage that they do. Linden Archers are possibly the best archer unit in the game. They're extremely tanky, and they do an extreme amount of damage. So these Linden Archers do very well against Isengard scouts. And Isengard scouts, as I've said before, are probably the #1 problem for Imladris. And I mean, they're the #1 problem because they increase the effectiveness of wargs, but they're also extremely good in their own right. But they're all dead, and they're not dead thanks to cavalry, they're dead thanks to Linden Archers. So that's a very nice example. However, I think I could have countered that a lot better if I'd been more aggressive, as I've mentioned before. So we'll speed it up quite a bit here, but also look at the inside economy buildings here now. All of these for me, and only 2 for Mogat here. And I'm just constantly my economy is just constantly ahead in this game. And don't forget that I've got these two. Usually in any other game, he would have these two and I'd have to harass them and win them for them myself. But because of how defensive you have to be with Imladris, he didn't have that opportunity to go and grab them. Therefore, his economy was behind right from the start of this game. Now look at this. I'm upgrading every single one of my buildings, whilst Moga has still only got these two buildings on the inside of his fortress. However, thanks to this nice little bit of play getting these Linden archers out, he has got quite a lot of map control on the bottom half of the map, but my Warg Riders are simply running rings around his units and kind of harassing a lot over here and starting to win a lot of that area of the map back. I'm also doing a bit of multitasking by creeping with these wargs up here, so really my presence over the map is becoming a lot more stronger than his, and that's simply due to the fact that cavalry is so good at gaining map control for you. However, he's kind of holding down this area pretty well, and as you see here, quite a bit of bad micromanagement once again from me, losing quite a few of my wargs. But all these examples of me doing bad micromanagement in these matchups, they just highlight the point even more about how strong Isengard is. Because if I make micro mistakes as Imladris, it's almost instantly GG, because you can make no mistakes as Imladris when you're playing against Isengard. But when you're playing as Isengard, you can make micro mistakes like that, and really it doesn't matter. You're probably just going to win anyway, and win relatively easily. So here we see that he's managed to build up his inside economy quite a bit better, and it's looking quite strong now. But compared to mine, I'm getting double production now on every single one of these forges. When I get these double production, then I'm going to have minus 50% on my upgrade cost reduction. So that's going to be huge. And it's really starting to spiral out of control. So yes, I haven't destroyed him in the early game like a lot of these other matches. I destroyed the enemy, or the enemy destroyed me when I was playing Imladris in the early game, and that's thanks to the wargs, the scouts, and sometimes the wildmen. In a lot of these games, wildmen haven't been a feature, but don't forget that they are always a constant threat. That if you don't get cavalry, there's always the threat that wildmen will come out and harass all of these resources, and there's really no way of you countering it. So yes, just look at my economy now. My economy is absolutely booming. And as we all know, economy for Isengard is super strong in general. And if you let Isengard get a super strong economy, really it will spiral out of control for you. So I've managed to get a few heroes out here. I've got Ugluk, and what my plan is at this moment is to get all of my heroes out, then destroy potentially one of these, or maybe even get an outpost to get some upgrades on my units. And here we do, I actually do destroy this, and actually I probably should have gone for the outpost because I could afford to do it, but as we know, I don't like going for outposts, so I don't do it, even though in this situation it probably would have been way more advantageous for me to go for an outpost. Anyway, that's for another video. So yes, I've actually gone for some siege, and I'm thinking about destroying this building. That may be a little bit premature, and I probably should have just gone for some upgrades instead. But once again, it's a mistake, and that is actually a macro mistake. It's a kind of a meta decision mistake. That's not gone well for me. But as we'll see in a little while, it's not really affecting me that much. So once again, it's suggesting that Isengard is just too strong in this matchup. Just too strong. So here we see Gildor has used his speed boost on his ally troops over here. So they've managed to run away pretty well. But it's at the cost of losing Gildor himself, because he can't move while that ability is activated. So look at all the resources that I'm just accumulating here. My economy is absolutely booming, while Imladris, as usual, are suffering on the economy front in the early game. Now, the advantage of getting a few rams out is going to allow me to destroy this Linden Tower, which is going to free up a lot of the flanking over here to kind of come in here, destroy this, then move in, and again a lot of the map control at the bottom. I've got a lot of the map control at the top, but still Moga has managed to hold on to it here. Now, Moga has gone for upgrades quicker than me, which is a huge advantage for him, and he's actually going to win a lot of the fights here. So I'm simply going to have to retreat a lot of the time, and that is once again a meta mistake from me, is that instead of getting this siege potentially, I should have got some upgrades, or I should have gone for this outpost and got some upgrades through that, so that I could have actually tried to fight for the upper half of this match, upper half of this map, I should say. And it looks like potentially he's going to go for some cavalry, you see. I'm not actually sure if he does go for any cavalry in this game. I think really you need cavalry to fight against the wargs. But once again, like, once I have like 4 or 5 warg battalions out, which I will almost always have because wargs are good against infantry anyway, and they're going to counter the Linden archers. If I have 4 or 5 battalions of warg riders out, you're going to need like 4 battalions of cavalry out to counter them. Otherwise, they're just going to get outnumbered and destroyed by the howl. So it's like, how are they going to afford it? How are they going to afford it in terms of money? How are they going to afford it in terms of command points? You may have seen Saruman is out here now, and Saruman is an anti-spam hero, so he's not really that great against Imladris. But, I mean, I've got so much money that why the hell not? Why not get Saruman? Once he's leveled up, he's good against everything. So, if I can level him up, and he will get quite a lot of levels if I manage to kill a lot of Imladris troops, really it's going to be a huge advantage for me to get Saruman. So let's have a look here what's going on. Here finally I've decided to go for some upgrades, and really once the upgrades come out it's going to be devastating for Imladris. As we see here, he's even got some forged blades out, so he's doing reasonably well in terms of upgrading his troops and not losing his troops, which is extremely important for Imladris. He's got 3 battalions of pikes with forged blades. That is a really, that is like, you know, the concrete counter to cavalry is forged blades pikes, and particularly forged blades tanky pikes like the Rivendell pikeman here. So probably he's going to go for the library instead, and that is actually, in my opinion, the correct decision, because the warg riders are reasonably countered by the pikes here, that they're not going to pose too much of a problem, that really you don't need the cavalry as much. And, oh, having said that, he has gone for the green pasture, so Mogat must be thinking about some even more pro strategies than I'm thinking about here in this game. So, as we see, he's doing reasonably well, and he's got quite a lot of the map. But once again, my economy is just out of control at the moment. And actually, even he's got a lot more command points. So really, I am not playing this game very well so far. But it's just coming down to the economy now, where, once again, if you start to trade units, it's in the favour of the person with the better economy, because they can just rebuild the units, whereas the enemy cannot do it. And yes, the cavalry is winning me a lot of the map control as well. So that is a good idea from Mogat to get some cavalry out. And yes, don't forget that he can upgrade his cavalry, whereas I can't because my upgrades are still being researched. So I'm kind of like just wandering around the map here, like trying to think what I can do. In the end, I decided to try and attack these pikes over here to deal some damage to them. And it's really a huge loss. Like, yes, upgrades are extremely good, but if you have isolated units and you lose them, don't forget that by upgrading your units, you're investing so much money, so much more money in them. So losing units is such a huge loss. But when you have clumps of units like this, that's really where the upgrades are extremely strong. And here I just lose loads and loads of warg riders. Luckily, a lot of my banner carriers managed to survive, and actually I don't lose a single battalion there. So that was just a bit of noob luck there from me to keep them all alive. That is also potentially an issue with cavalry in general, is that as long as your banner carriers survive, you don't have any monetary loss, because you can simply wait them around as I am doing here, and they'll regenerate by themselves for free. Once again, that's another point for another video, potentially. But once again, I just completely overwhelm him in economy. And the reason why I overwhelm him in economy is because he had to play such like a strange style. He had to play almost bizarrely. Now, the bizarre play that he did do in going for extremely early Linden archers, in not grabbing these 2 outside farms in particular, that bizarre play was actually, in my opinion, the exact correct decision to go for as Imladris in this Imladris vs Isengard matchup. And it's, as we see, it's allowed him to get to the mid to the late game, where actually probably in the mid to late game Imladris has an advantage over Isengard, all other things considered. Or rather, all other things being equal, really Imladris can do extremely well against Isengard in the mid to late game. But all things aren't equal. I have the vastly superior economy because I'm Isengard, and because I have all these upgraded forges. Yes, forges. And they're gaining me such a decrease in my unit cost, my unit upgrade cost. And I do believe he's actually I think Saruman, yes, Saruman's still alive, but as we see, he's destroyed a lot of my pikes. So he's kind of doing the exact same thing that Isengard loves to do against Imladris in the early game. He's kind of doing it to me in the mid to late game. He's attacking my pikes and then trampling the rest with these upgraded cavalry, and he's actually got enough money for an outpost here. So he's done extremely well. However, this is a bit of a mistake on his part, I should say, because I have got this siege, and I can simply move in and attack his outpost here, and it's going to be very difficult for him to move in with these units over here and come and defend it. And indeed, the outpost goes down. So that is a very, very significant loss. And because his economy is nowhere near as strong as mine, it's even more important for him. All this time I'm trying to harass over here with these pikes whilst I'm macroing these units, and I never really managed to do it like a giant noob. But once again, it doesn't really matter. And here we see the Howl is so effective against these Imladris troops when you combine it with pikes, because the Imladris troops can't turn around to attack the wargs even though they would win in a one-on-one battle, because the pikes are always there to defend them. So that is something, a nice idea that you can think about in your games as well. So yes, really, like, I would say Mogat was probably winning on the infantry front for a lot of this match. Although I did definitely have the better heroes. In fact, I don't believe Mogat has any heroes at the moment. But now that I've got my upgrades out, it's starting to look like Imladris is once again losing, and it's like I'm trading here. I'm trading units. Some of my units are dying, some of his are dying, but once again, trading is in my favour because my economy is vastly superior. And really, I'm just winning the economy battle. I don't want to go over the point too many times. I don't know how many times I've said that my economy is better than his, but it's true. My economy is better than his. And I believe that is winning me the game now. And it's not very difficult for me to just continue trading units, to continue, like, as long as I'm killing a few of his units, like, I could be losing like 2-1, and I'd still be doing reasonably well. Because one unit of Imladris against these Urukai, like, that's not a big deal in itself because the units are worth more. But also, I've got the money to replenish them. So it's that simple. His bizarre play in the early game was the perfect counter to Isengard's early game. So it's like a catch-22. If you're playing Imladris and you want to survive into the mid-game, you have to play in this bizarre ultra-defensive style. And if you do play in that ultra-defensive style, Isengard can simply invest so much more in their economy that they're just going to overwhelm you in the mid to late game once they have that super strong economy, and you're going to lose anyway. So that really is why I think Isengard versus Imladris, that matchup is to the point of, it's like at the breaking point, it's very close to being broken, and almost, you know, I can't think of anything that Imladris can do better. And even in this game, as we saw, as I've said before, I could have played it so much better, I could have been so much more aggressive, I could have got so much more kills, I could have not allowed him to get those Linden archers, and it would have been over even quicker. Despite all those mistakes I made, all that economy that I had over him allowed me to win the game with relative ease. Once again, Isengard defeats Imladris. Now, I have actually cherry-picked the games here because there was a couple times that I played Imladris and won against Isengard. I didn't actually ever do that against Elendil or Mogat, as I remember. I do believe I did that against Dud. And that was when the game reached the mid to late game, where I actually believe Imladris potentially has the upper hand, especially if you include Lawmasters, as you can see in the video that's currently playing. I managed to build up a huge army with Lawmasters, with all my heroes, and I managed to simultaneously use almost every buff that Imladris has, and in that way I managed to destroy a lot of the late game Isengard army. But the reason I got to this point was because Dud didn't actually go for a warg start. He went for the upgrade to the Citadel to increase the resource production, and so he went instead for an economy rush. That gave me the time to creep, to gain map control, and actually to destroy his warg pit once he built it, because I scouted it with Gildor. Now, the games that I lost as Isengard versus Dud and Elendil, I actually put that down to personal mistakes. So I said earlier that you can make micro mistakes and macro mistakes with Isengard. against Imladris and still win relatively easily, but of course there's a limit, and in those games I made some pretty huge mistakes, such as losing my wargs to the cavalry fighting at the well versus Dud when he went for a cavalry start, and some quite bad troll creeping where, although I didn't lose the battalion of scouts, they got heavily damaged, and therefore, after I creeped the troll, I had to keep them out of the game for quite a while for them to regenerate, and it's all about timing in this, where, because they were out of the game, it gave Imladris enough chance to build up to reach the mid-game in a reasonably strong position, and Elendil played very well and managed to defeat me as Imladris versus Isengard. So, of course, I'm not saying that in every single game, Isengard will always beat Imladris, but what I am saying is that it is almost, if not definitely, 100% of the time, if Isengard plays perfectly versus a perfect Imladris play, Isengard will win. I personally can think of no way that Imladris can beat the perfect Isengard play. So, what do you think? Please leave a comment, or if you're watching this on the Modern Union forums, leave a comment there. I encourage you to leave comments in both sections so that the debate can become more robust. So first, we have to decide if this matchup is imbalanced. If it is imbalanced, all hope is not lost, because of course we can balance it. So, what are some ideas to balance it? Well, some things that me and some other players have thought of are: number 1, to reduce the cost of Gildor. This may seem insignificant, but because he's 250 resources, it actually cripples you quite a bit in the early game if you go for him, and it's very good to go for him because he can scout your enemy, and so you can see what strategy he's using, so you don't get caught out by a quick cavalry rush. To specifically counter some of Isengard's strengths in the early game, you could think about increasing the price of the War Pit by about 100 resources. You could consider increasing the amount of experience required for a scout to unlock the bow, either by increasing the amount of time it gets to level 2, or simply making it level 3 to unlock the bow. This change to the scout would be huge in this matchup, because it would mean that Imladris wouldn't face 2 archer battalions within the first few minutes, because simply creeping the wildman wouldn't be enough for the scouts to get to level 3. One of the biggest changes that I and a lot of other players in particular would like to see is an increase in the effectiveness of the counter system, so that, for example, pikes do much more damage to cavalry. I think this would really help in this matchup, and in a lot of other features of Edain, and not only to increase the balance of certain matchups, but also to enhance the enjoyment, as well as the skill required to play well in Edain. So thank you for watching, and let me know what you guys think about this matchup. There's one other thing that I'd like to mention, and that is the Dunedain outpost. So some of you guys may be thinking, actually, the Dunedain outpost would be a good idea to counter Isengard because you get a lot of cheap units from that outpost. And it's also a very good defensive position. While all these things are true, it's another example of going for early outposts. And from my personal experience, going for early outposts is almost always a mistake if your enemy counters it correctly. And this is something that we should be thinking about in balance. We should always be thinking about best play from both sides, so that there's the opportunity for the game to be balanced, even with 100% perfect play from each side. The issue with the outpost in this particular matchup, in my opinion, and I have learnt this through experience, is that the only way to make it work is to actually rush for the outpost, because if you don't rush for the outpost, you're going to have the exact same problems of the early game with Imladris, because you're either going to have to go for cavalry or infantry, and as we've seen in these games, under perfect play from Isengard, those two strategies just simply don't work. So the only thing that you could consider doing is simply rushing to creep the troll, then using that money to buy the outpost, and then getting some units out from that outpost. But it's so difficult to do this because first you have to get the archery tower to defend that outpost, so it's not just going to get destroyed by some units. Then you have to build the unit production sub-building on the outpost. Then you have to start getting your units out. And in all this time, and all that money that you're investing into it, your enemy can simply buy some rams and just come in and destroy your outpost, and that's it. It's GG already. So unfortunately, I didn't actually record any replays in which the Dunedain outpost was used, but you know, kind of take my word for it that there were a few examples, and particularly Mogat used that example against me as Isengard, and I managed to quite easily deal with it. But maybe you guys could make it work better than we did. So yes, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and hopefully I would like to see some changes to this matchup, as long as it definitely is imbalanced. So thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.